Hello, class. This is Cam Addis, your history instructor at Austin Community College. I want to talk a little bit about History Hub, which is our open educational resource, OER, free online textbook that I wrote for you. This is the home page here. It has a little bit of discussion here about why it's important to study history. I'd like you to look over that at some point. Also, some more nuts and bolts information here in terms of licensing and a little bit of software that's available to you. We do have text-to-speech software that I've gotten reasonably good reviews on from students. It'll once in a while run into an abbreviation that it doesn't quite know what to do with, but it works decently. And then we also have translations into other languages as well, which can be beneficial, although you want to also keep in mind that the exams themselves are going to be in English. I think the most important thing I would point out in general about the textbook is that you can always adjust both the size and the brightness or the contrast. So to make it bigger or smaller on most devices, you can just use Command plus, Command minus. I want you to be comfortable with it. I want you to be comfortable with the contrast. And I've tried to use black on a white background. It's just sort of the most basic best practice for contrast there. But adjust or season to taste there, something you're comfortable with. I would definitely advise reading the textbook on some sort of a computer, on at least an iPad or a laptop or a desktop even, as opposed to reading it on a phone. You can access it on a phone, and it will do in a pinch, but you're going to be able to see the material and see the maps and images and things like that much better if you look at it on a computer. So let's pop over to the other thing you want to keep track of here is that this website has both 1301 and 1302 chapters. So you want to make sure to be reading the correct chapters that correspond to whatever section that you signed up for. Let's take History 1302 here, for instance, and look at a chapter. A couple things I want to point out. One is I would use the scroll bar at the very beginning just to kind of go down and check out and see how long the chapter is, see where you're heading, take a look at the subheadings. The chapters do vary quite a bit in size. And so there may be many that you want to not read all in one sitting, and you want to stop and take a little break, maybe get a drink of water, eat a banana, walk around a little bit, or maybe even come back to it on a different day. So take a look at that with a scroll bar, but I would not use the scroll bar for the actual reading of the text. And the reason for that is that studies have shown that the reading comprehension is usually better for people using traditional print, a hard copy of a book, as opposed to reading online. However, if they don't use the scroll bar over here and instead use, say, just a simple arrow key up and down, or you can just use your fingers on a scratch pad or a trackpad to move up and down a little bit more smoothly, uniformly, that ends up working better than the scroll bar for sure. But a couple other things you want to keep in mind is you do want to look at the images and the maps. This chapter here doesn't seem to have any actual maps that are jumping out at me right off the bat here, but these images and maps, they will help you understand the material. Another thing that you want to keep in mind is that I'm going to be showing you the learning objectives here in a minute. You do not want to look at the learning objectives and then go over and cherry pick and try to find like an Easter egg hunt. Here's where it talks about that, and then skip a bunch of passages and then go find the next. For one, these passages in between the learning objectives, they're going to serve as kind of a connective tissue and help explain the rest of the material. It'll all make much more sense to you if you read the entire chapter. So don't go try to cherry pick information concerning the learning objectives. The other problem is that a lot of times people do that, and then they fail to realize that there's more information having to do with that particular learning objective that they missed when they skipped over and tried to go to the next one. There are a lot of all of the above for instance, options on the test, or none of the aboves. And those really favor people that have read the entire material. A lot of the incorrect distractors, as they're called, or incorrect items on the exam come from the text, except that it's something that's applied backward. So it can't be just something that I've seen that word, so I think I'll choose that one. You have to genuinely understand what you're reading. Now, like most of us, when you look at a big textbook, a big college textbook, there's way more information than you could ever, memorize or remember or anything like that. And so the question arises, well, what do I need to know for the test? And the answer is, you want to focus on the material laid out in the learning objectives. Those should drive your reading. Now, as you're reading, a couple other things to point out. Do not stop at all of the links. In fact, that would slow you down and completely disrupt the flow of your understanding and all that. You do not want to do that. I just have those in there for your general edification in case you want to learn a little bit more about something, or maybe it's something you're going to write on, or you're confused about it or want to know about it. So a lot of them they connect to an encyclopedia entry like Wikipedia, or there'll be a word like piecemeal. What does piecemeal mean? How many of you know what that means? Well, all I know is that some of you know what it means and some of you don't, most likely. So you click on that and you'll just go over to a dictionary definition of it. Oops. Leave that there. Come back over here. So you don't want to stop at all of the links, but you do if you don't understand a word. What else can we say about the reading? Many of you maybe have had the experience, I know I have, of reading along and you realize after a while, wow, these words were going in my eyeballs here, but I wasn't really thinking about what I was reading. I wasn't comprehending it. In fact, I haven't for the last few pages. I was thinking about Friday night or something. If that happens, you might want to stop and take a break, but go back and reread that section. A lot of people tend to visualize material more when they're reading fiction than nonfiction. And they'll visualize this in their head. And oftentimes you'll hear people say, oh, I saw the movie. The movie wasn't as good as the book. What do they mean when the movie wasn't as good as the book? Is it wasn't as good as the movie they made, their own movie, as they read that book. But then they tend to not do that when they're looking at nonfiction. To the very best you can, try to visualize things in your head as you're reading this nonfiction. Try to, in other words, quote, see the material, and that will really help you comprehend it, and it will make it more interesting as well. So we have the chapters, they vary in length. You want to look over the whole chapter before you start, look at the subheadings. You don't want to stop at the links. You do want to read the entire thing start to finish. But there is this question, well, what do I focus on? Is there a review for the exam? Yes, there is. It is the learning objectives. So this is another place where you can access the chapters. You can go here. You got the drop down there. But the chapters, LOs, LO stands for learning objectives. This is also where you'll find the learning objectives. One of the things you want to do is read over the top paragraphs of the learning objective page. That is time well spent. You will not regret having done that. Many people, they struggle on the test, and then I go back and look and I find out, well, they skipped the instructions. They never really looked over the top of the LOs. They never really took that advice. A lot of people don't even know there is such thing as the learning objectives. You might as well learn about that right off the bat before you start Unit 1. So here we have learning objectives here. Number 1, they go in order. This is chapter 1, and then the learning objectives go in chronological order for the most part. Once in a while, there'll be one where I say you want to keep an eye on something throughout the entire chapter, but for the most part, they're going down in order as you go. But like I said, read the connective tissue in between, and that will pay off on the exams. You can see every once in a while, I'll add an extra learning objective there in blue. I call it a forest for the trees check. You may have heard that saying, don't miss the forest for the trees. Don't miss the bigger issue by focusing too much on details. I will never ask you what year did something happen, how many people died in a battle, or anything like that, even though I might roll it into the test item just to help you in case you happen to know those things, the level of detail along with it. But the item on the test is going to be drawn directly from this LO. It will not be the same question, but if you are in charge of this LO, if you really understand it, you will be able to handle the test item. So what does it say up here? Every test item is tied to a learning objective, and 90% of the LOs are tied to a test item. So read this over very carefully. It will give you a lot of good advice, including avoiding trying to go track down the learning objective responses online or something. You can do that, but I've seen them and they're bad and they won't prepare you for the test. You also don't want to go in there and find a section that connects to your LO and then copy and paste it. It's very important that you put it in your writing. That's a better test of whether you can understand. How much will you put in there? Probably roughly around a paragraph. Now, some of the learning objectives are a little bit longer than others, or they'll have a couple learning objectives kind of clustered together because they're part of the same idea. But for the most part, you're looking at maybe a short paragraph. Now, I don't have time to obviously go and grade your homework or anything like that. I got, hundreds of students, and that's not really what's done at the college level. But I do want to go and see one example of this from you. And so I want you to go over and just submit one learning objective, one paragraph from the unit 1. And it can be any of them of your choice, basically. But that's what I'm going to be grading here with this early alert learning objective paragraph. Now, here's another thing that might be kind of helpful for you over here under guides. What is a good analytical paragraph? That can be helpful as well. It talks about the importance of an opening sentence. That opening sentence to me is key. That's something you should be able, if you only had one sentence, what would that one sentence be? Now you have a little bit more than one sentence and you can flesh it out, but I would like to know what that one sentence would be if you only had one sentence. And that's a sentence that you should be able to hand to a friend or a relative, and they should be able to tell you what the prompt was that you were responding to. In other words, there needs to be alignment between the learning objective and your response. In other words, an easier way of putting that, you need to answer the question. So we have these things over here. This tab is the one that you use the most. This is just a help tab over here, has my email. If you do happen to see a typo, and I don't mean just a stylistic suggestion or anything, but an actual outright typo mistake, you go ahead and let me know. I'll give you a point for that, up to 2 for the whole course. We just got guides over here, resume over here, memory hole you don't need to worry about for now. For the online courses, that concerns the face-to-face lecture course essay. The Rear Defogger is a very interesting site, and it talks about fallacies that you'll kind of fall into as you're interpreting history or as you're reading other people's interpretations of history. And there are a number of different ones. And I may use this as kind of a numerical guide. When I grade your paper, I may say, hey, go take a look at RD number 12, RD-12. What I mean is, hey, go over and take a look at the Rear Defogger page, click on this. It happens to be anchor bias. There are all kinds of biases and fallacies and everything that we fall into, all of us. It's not something that happens to dumb people, but not smart people or anything like that. It's how our brains work. And in fact, these are the very things, as I put here, these are what politicians, salesmen, et cetera, take advantage of when they're trying to manipulate you and spin your head in a particular direction. So it's very good to know about them. And so anyway, this is a very interesting page. It's not necessarily one you'll be looking at on a day-to-day basis, but it's one we'll be referring to from time to time with the numerical codes based on my comments about your written work. We got a timeline over here from our friends at the University of Houston who put together the Digital History, which is a great site and one that inspired me to write History Hub. A lot of their learning objectives tend to be listed more sort of vertically, whereas I kind of visualize it horizontally, although you could do it either way. But you can put in various years here. Not as big of a problem in History 1302 as in 1301, keeping track of where you are, because our entire course in 02 goes from 1877 up until the present, or 2020 or so. But, you know, you want to be oriented in time and space. And I'm going to be talking over in the toolkit, the optional video, about having Google Earth open as a tab so you can see, you know, where it is we're talking about, because geography matters. History happens in time and space, and you want to be oriented in time and space. That doesn't mean I'm going to go ask you about a year, like I said, but you need to know what order things happened in, because causation is so important, how one thing connects and leads to another. A lot of the context of what goes on is very important to know. So we got the timeline here. We got a library that I put together. This has a lot of great links. Has the ACC library for one thing, which is really important. It has a lot of pages devoted just to U.S. history, might be helpful for you on your written assignments. We got a kind of a reference desk here. We got an atlas or a map room, core gateway. We got podcasts, videos, audio, census records, political cartoons, newspaper, magazine archives, etc. All kinds of things are great out there. They're available online. That I collected some of them for you. But really the main tab that you're going to be looking at over here on a day-to-day basis is the chapters LO tab, which will have both your chapters and your learning objectives that will drive your reading. So many other things will probably pop up, but that's it for now. I wanted to give you kind of a brief overview of History Hub and what's in there, how to use it. And I guess that's it for now. So you can move on and watch the third video. Talks about teaching philosophy. And I hope you have a good day. Thank you very much. Bye.